Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Simuka Comedy Festival Comedy Symposium, which is Sustainable Inclusion of Women in the Comedy Sector. My name is Zaza, and I'm going to be the moderator for this session. Just a little bit of the background in terms of what this symposium is aiming to do and what it is about. So, the ratio of male to female comedians worldwide is very low, hence, there's need for the industry to embrace the female comedians that are already practicing and attract new comedians to try and balance the numbers in the sector. The aim of the symposium is set to create a clear understanding as to why the sector has few comedians. It shall address the stereotypes about the treatment of women in the industry and how to curb the negativity around women in the arts, and also discuss ways for creating a female-friendly environment that attracts new females and promotes the ones already practicing, and also how to include, involve, sustain, and protect the female comedian in their comedy career. And today I've got a panel of really amazing women who are in the comedy sector or who are also supporting the comedy sector. So I have Tare Chirewa, who is the Zimbabwe German Society Director. Tare, welcome, and thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Lovely. And we also have Munya who is a comedian and the director of Sekesai Collective. Munya, welcome, and we are happy to have you here.
Thanks for having me.
Lovely. Then we have Sharon Chideu, who is a comedian and also works with Bustop TV. Sharon, welcome, and thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having this symposium and having me.
Indeed, it's really, really important for us to have it. And last but not least, we have Samantha Nengomasha, who is the project manager at Hivos Southern Africa. Samantha, welcome, and thank you so much for being here and doing the stage with us.
Hi, Zaza, and happy to be here.
Lovely. So I'm just going to pass the mic to Tare to say something in terms of your response to the topic, sustainable inclusion of women in the comedy sector.
Okay. Hi, everybody. Like you heard, my name is Tare, short for Tare Miredzwa, Chirewa, the director of the Zimbabwe German Society, which is also known as the Goethe Centrum Harare. I'm not a comedian, as you just heard, but when I was asked to sit on the panel, I mean, the first thing that I thought about was it's the same problem across the sector in terms of female creatives and the space that they have within the sector itself. And one of the things that I've noticed based on different conversations with female creatives and what's out there is one of the biggest things is our culture and how we are, for lack of a better way of putting it, cultured. Because most of the time you find that female creatives are really big in their prime before they get married and start having children. And then the moment that they settle down, they move away from the spotlight and focus on being a parent and being a mom and a housekeeper and that sort of thing. And I don't know if it's because there's lack of support from partners or it's just that's how we've been taught that once you're married, you now need to behave in a certain way. You now need to do things in a certain way. So you can't then be what you were before you were married. And I think that's an absolute lie because I am married, I have children, but I still do this on a daily basis. I mean, my kids understand. They know that the seasons when mom doesn't come home before bedtime, they know that, if they can go with me, we go together. It's so I think it's literally about the conversations that you have with your person when you do meet them and how you decide you're going to move forward thereafter.
Okay, great. Thank you very much for that, Tare. And you touched on something about how some female comedians end up no longer practicing their craft because they take on other responsibilities. They either become married or they become mothers, and that also gets in the way of their career. And I really like what you said in terms of how it's about the conversations that you have with your partners. So my question to you is: the question, my question to you is it a matter of people not being able to have the conversations with their partners, or is it a case of them not actually being interested in having the conversations because at that particular time when they get married or when they become mothers, the careers that they will be practicing at that particular moment will not be rewarding as much?
So I will be very clear that this is my opinion, and everyone can say what they think, right? But I really think, and this is also based on different conversations with people and stuff, and I think it really comes down to how we've been raised. We've been raised to aspire to be married, you know. And I think it's a culture that's been there the past probably 10 years or so, because when I came back from university, the first question I got asked was, "Oh, so are you married now?" And for me, it was like, I just got back from university. I am not ready to be married, or, And the girl's like, "You're 23. What's wrong with you? Like, what's going on? Why are you not married?" So I feel like we are taught to aspire for this thing without realizing that it's a lifelong commitment and that you shouldn't lose yourself in that commitment. You're two people coming together to start something and move forward in that thing that you started, but it doesn't mean that you need to then completely forget everything that you were before that. From my own experience, I did have relationships where it was work is 8 to 5. Anything that's after 5 o'clock, what are you doing? Where are you at? And for me, I knew that that's not the type of relationship I wanted to be, because I knew what it is that I wanted. So I think the question is, are we empowered enough to stand and say what we want to do? Are we empowered enough to be bold enough to say that this is me, this is how you found me, and this is what I am going to be tomorrow, after you have been married, after I have your children, I'm still going to carry on down this path? I think that's where the questions are. That is your passion, or what it is that you're doing. Is it something that drives you enough that it defines who you are, so you put in the work despite all the other added responsibilities that come on top of it, right? So I guess when you break it down, it has to come down to that. Like, are you doing it for yourself? Are you doing it just because, So those are the things that determine how you move forward. And then it's also about family. Can you stand up to people and say, "No, this is me. This is what I'm going to do." So when people then ask, "Oh, Sakamkadzwa," he will say confident, "Oh, she's a comedian." And in our culture, people be like, "Hey, that's not funny." And so being confident enough to say, "Yeah," and it pays the bills and it brings money home, So I think that's where it is, that we're not a people that look at anything creative as viable and bringing in income. But in actual fact, every single thing that we do is creative. It comes down to it. Like, there's nothing that you can do. Like this cup, your routine, a cup has been designed by somebody. It's creative work. So I think we need to change how we think, shift mindsets completely, because that's where it is.
Okay, great. Thank you very much, Tare. I have a couple more questions, but I'm going to hold on to them and move on to Munya. Munya, what is your take in terms of the topic, in terms of how can we sustainably make sure that we have more inclusion of comedians in the comedy sector?
It's so weird, because like we're saying, we don't know the exact answers or what exactly is out there. Somebody once said to me, "Is it that how do we have more women be more confident?" And I was like, we're pretty confident, but we don't feel as welcome. So if it's very male dominated, and if the audience has a perception of you should be in skits instead, you should be acting like a maid, or there's a lot of skits where it's like somebody gets touched and then you just end up yelling and "Oh, scandalous, how could you do that to me? I'm not sexual at all," which is not true. We're well-rounded human beings, and we should be allowed to present that about ourselves. And yeah, it's just we're not really allowed to just be normal human beings and people who crack jokes about silly things. and it seems like a weird thing to like cry for. I'm not saying I. Okay, sorry, I'm just hearing like some weird feedback. I just hear sorry. Okay. It's a weird thing to cry for, and I'm not saying that I want to be able to be bad or I want to be able to like make fart jokes or something, but I want to be given the same amount of grace that the men are being given. Be given the same amount of grace to just say anything without always having to conform to this box of like what I was supposed to have been like. I was supposed to be super ladylike and this is this, because like those expectations never end. And there's, apart from you demanding that from me, there's honestly no reason why I should have to adhere to those standards. So I think, yeah, like as Tare was saying, getting the audience used to hearing women speak their mind, which is not really a thing in our culture. So it then extends to you're not really, it's going to be a bit weird seeing them go on stage and then giving them the platform to then go on stage to say what they want for 20 minutes when ordinarily you talk over them in every meeting and every family function you have. Yeah.
Indeed. Thank you very much for that, Munya. And as a practicing comedian, maybe you could give us a little bit more instances, because you talked about issues to do with how, as a female, you're expected to play the stereotypical roles where either you're the maid or you're the outraged woman, and often there's not a lot of bandwidth to play with in terms of what you can play around with as a comedian. And you also talked about how it's really important for you to also have the same amount of grace that is given to your counterparts, to your male counterparts. Can you tell us a little bit more in terms of what has been your experience of that, and how have you dealt with that, with those instances where you're being asked to play a role that pigeonholes you, or a stereotypical role, or where there's more pressure for you because they're like, oh, so you think you're funny, you think you're female and you can be funny, so show us the funny. So yeah.
Yeah, luckily I haven't had too much pressure to be in those situations, but I kind of had almost the opposite, where I do something that's not what they would be, or something that's funny when guys do it. But then because women said it, it's suddenly not funny anymore. Almost like the joke isn't the joke is the oppression. Doesn't make any sense. So yeah, that's been kind of tough, because somebody will straight up tell you, sorry, where was the joke? Should we just do that instead? And you're thinking, no, it was all the joke. So it's a bit awkward. But I think just find the people that you are talking to, and oftentimes it'll be the women. And if the men get on board, then that's fine. But I don't think it's my responsibility to entertain the men in the audience, whatever, because there's like 10 other people who are coming on stage who are men who can do that for you. So I can't vibe. I'm just, as a comedian, as an artist, as in anything, you cannot vibe with exactly everyone's taste. That's not going to happen. So just be happy with the people you are talking to, because also I think there's an issue in Zim where we all try to act like Zim society is like a monolith and we all like the exact same things and da da da. And that's not true. That's just not true. Not in music, not in food, not in anything. Yes, we have things that are popular culture, but there's also outliers in like fringe society and everything. And it should be okay to be part of that and also appeal to that in order to make it grow. Things are more interesting when you add flavors to the pot, not just everyone is listening to the exact same song. It's like Kanamapinda, like Butsu China Zupupi Suntown, and literally everyone has the exact same pair of Mapush. It starts out fun and then it's just a bit and then obviously they break after like 6 months, and then if you still have them now, you look whack. Like, so let us have that mix. And then it has been annoying sometimes also when it's the opposite, especially if you try to behave, so not on camera, but if you try to behave backstage the way that the men do. Oh, it's inappropriate, equality. And I'm like, but this is no equality. Equity, actually, first of all, it should be equity, not equality. Second of all, it is equality because I'm catching up. I have 3 months of being rowdy and disrespectful and annoying and like not listening to people to catch up on. So if you get to do that all morning and I do it for 2 seconds, I still have like 3 hours to catch up on, unless you're saying that nobody should be doing that. Then I actually agree. And we should be the exception to that rule. If we're having no exceptions, then no exceptions. If we're having people talk to each other and do whatever they want to each other, then I don't think I should go in. But don't want to I still get paid. Actually, that's not true. You might not get paid. Just try.
Yeah, I was actually just about to follow up on that to say, have there been instances where that actually results in you not getting more jobs, or you actually being sidelined out of projects because of you trying to be within the space and exist within the space, seeing that there's already this kind of being that is already expected of men, but when you try and do that, there's like no etiquette, etiquette, and oh well, let's be ladylike. Oh, you're a woman, you have to behave a certain way.
So luckily, you wouldn't know about those things, right? Because they didn't call you. So I'm not going to know what they didn't call me for. But I think, yeah, just maybe not necessarily being a woman, but not fitting into the culture of like shooting and filming and just like arts in general, which tends to be quite a boys' club. So if you weren't at the Airbnb staying at the Airbnb that turned into a house party, that turned into drinking until 2 a.m., that turned into everybody coming late on the bus and showing up at like 11 for an 8 o'clock shoot, you're going to look like the difficult person because you're the only one who didn't go to the boys' house last night and do all these things. Like you can redefine professionalism if everybody's doing it, but when you're outside of that, it's very, very awkward. So yes, I think I've heard from the grapevine, but I don't personally know. I do think some people have been like, oh, she's so difficult, bitch. And like, I don't know that. I'm not saying let's all be here at 8. I'm perfectly fine with starting at 11. Just let me know before I leave home, and I can also sleep. If you're sleeping, then I should sleep too. Why should I have to be sitting here waiting for you? Because at the end of the day, as a person who's on screen, you're really like the last piece of a project. From the audience perspective, it looks like you're important, but you're not important at all on a set. Everybody else is. And I'm nothing unless everybody else is set up. So it just makes no sense to be putting in all this effort and the other people who actually are the job are just, being boys, cracking their jokes in the bathroom, cracking their jokes at home, cracking their jokes when they're drinking, and seeing each other outside and talking about women and that. That can be a bit difficult. But I saw Maggie making a face, so I'm pretty sure she had something to add. I saw your brain be like, oh, man, deep down in your heart. You recognize the trauma signals. You recognize the trauma signals.
Yeah, and maybe in that regard, we segue into Sharon's contribution in terms of what has been your experience of working within the sector as a female, and also why there's so few female comedians within the space.
You're muted.
Sorry, we cannot hear you. Yeah, you're on mute.
Right. By the way, my experience as from the get-go, from the time that I said I told my family that I wanted to get into this industry, like just the film industry, not specifically comedy. My parents were like, cool, fine, going to school. But then it's the other ones, like the immediate family, the extended family, they'd be like, mukutosiya mwana musikana achipinda muindustry umu munoziva zvinoitwa, so if they had listened, I might not have been here, but since I'm kind of stubborn, I think I would have been here anyway. But yeah, so they were more like I do with teaching or nursing kana zvanga zvanetsa, because they assumed I was getting into the film industry because I had failed everywhere else. That was their assumption. So I was like, no, I actually want to do this. Like, I love this thing. I like from school, from being on stage in school. I was like, I want to do this as a career. So yeah, scratch that. So I went ahead, I did it. They gave my parents a warning. My parents did not heed those warnings, and I thank them for that. So now I'm here and I'm doing what I'm doing. And they start seeing me on newspapers and whatnot, on social media, on international television broadcast, and they were like, "Inka zviri kutoita." I'm like, "Inka zviri kutoita." Magi, Magi. And I'm like, what happened to my name, my Sharon? Dakuita manje. What's up with that? So it's when it's going down now, all right. Okay, I think it's working. But then for them, I think for other parents to let their girls, their children come into this industry, it's because of those other stories. Ameitika. Personally, I haven't experienced. Oh, actually, I have experienced it. Ameitika kutunonzo. You know, when women go looking for jobs, it happens in every industry. You know, the carpet interviews and whatnot. It happens everywhere. But I don't know why when it comes to the industry, film industry, means pune mahore. Now they are wars. Excuse my French, but they associate women in our industry with that. Why? Because of our hours, because we are very vocal. Yeah, exactly. I think mostly because of that. I remember when I used to be in the whole marriage setup way back when, there was a day that I came late from work. Wasn't even comedy, I wasn't even in the film industry yet then. I came late like after hours. And ndakagariswa pasi ndakaitirwa dare. They were like, mukadzi haadzoke kumba nguva dzakadai so. And in my mind, I'm thinking, but I'm coming from work. I'm not coming from the club or partying or anything. But yeah, basically, ndakagariswa dare. Tkanzi mukadzi haadzoke nguva dzakadai. And I was like, okay. So I always laugh back at that time of my life and think everything happens for a reason. I think if I had stayed in that setup, there would be no Maggie. Yours wouldn't know me. But yeah. So I'm like grateful for that. So I feel like some people don't get into this industry because of that. Like culturally, there's just stuff that women should not do. Stuff that's expected of you. Which okay, fine, you can do that, and it maybe. But the moment that you want to settle down, if you want to settle down, if you want to find a husband and be married, have kids, then behave a certain way. Do not have some jobs. Sena now. So that's one thing that I think is stopping other women from coming into this industry. That and so we have very funny females out there, but then they just can't take that leap. And also another thing is they think, "Nyakuti, does it pay? Can I make a living out of it?" So they start wondering, how am I going to take care of my family, my kids with this job? So I find people who meet me in town or wherever, and they're like, "I love what you do. I always watch, but then what else do you do?" I mean, that question used to annoy me a lot. But then now I find the response, Kuti, I am proud of the response. I'm like, nothing. That is it. That's what I do. And that's how I'm surviving. That's how I'm taking care of my kids. That's how I'm the way I am right now. It's just that. They're like, sure, sakatopinda say. And I'm like, just start. Just start. Like the way we started, just start. And if you see any messages calling out for females to come through, don't be scared. So that's what happens. And then in response to Munya, which was like, "I see your face, Sharon, I see your face." There's a question that you asked Zaza when you were like, have you lost jobs because of, my sex? I need to be clear about this. Like, okay, I've been doing this for 7 years. So far, before 2021, it's been fine. If I had lost jobs, I don't know, like Munya was saying. But the moment that I got pregnant, like I had my first kid before this, so it was fine. So they never saw me pregnant. But the moment I got pregnant, I get questions like, so can you handle it? No, awuzonethe. Manje. So guys, I've been losing jobs. Guys, I've been losing so many jobs. The amount of segregation that I've been going through this year, you have no idea. I got to a point where I was like, yeah, like you're at the brink of depression because they're like, I'm sick and tired of this. Be it a kitchen party that needs an MC. So the moment I'm upfront, because now sometimes now you have to be upfront because it's now visible. Like, yes, I'm free. That's if you're okay with having a pregnant MC. They're like, yeah, I'm sure it should be fine, but I'll get back to you. And that's it. Yeah. So I can, from the top of my head, I can think of 3 jobs that have just disappeared because of that. And then from my own, from people wanda jaira che wanda garantichi, some jobs are no one's but asizoiti saka iwewe sara up. So yeah, that's been happening a lot, and that's because I've got ovaries, guys. It's because I've got ovaries. I'm like, until I tell you, Kuti, I'm not able to. Let me. Exactly. Until I tell you, let me. But no, I'm disabled. The big curvy belly is a disability. So that's what I had to see.
Oh, interesting. Thank you very much, Sharon, for that. Lots of things to unpack there in what you said in terms of your experience and what you have encountered. And I'm just going to pick a few things from what you said and maybe ask a few questions. You talked about how other people, extended family, were against you training to become a filmmaker, but your family stuck with you, and in a way, you had your support system at that particular moment for you to pursue your passion. How important has been community and support system for you in terms of continuing with your work as a comedian?
It's been very important. I don't want to lie. There's just something different when there are people who are like, yes, behind you. They're like, yes, yes, yes. I think it would have been different if I was to continue without their support. I would have done it, but I would have been like, I wish you guys had been behind me. But because they are, I'm like, I thank you. I think, and it gives me one motivation as well. Like, okay, so they believe that I can actually do this. Because sometimes you question yourself, especially when you're starting out and things are just not working. And then you're like, but my family has been behind me all along, so keep pushing, Sharon. You don't want to stop now. And then they'll be like, so you're like, keep at it. Because I remember there's a year that I was like, you know what, I'm tired. I'm done. You know, Shangotang, I was like, this is just too much. No, because it takes a while for people to get used to you, to accept you, and be like, females. Yeah, especially at Bustop. There was a time when we started with me and Samantha, and then a guy joined in, and then the guy left, and then people were like, Ashana kids, Ashana kids. Yeah, and then even before that, it was Bosked and Butisi. So when it was me and Samantha, they'll be like, koma na magenda kopi. So you'd see those comments. And then Prosper came, Prosper left, it's like Ashana is a and we actually also believed that once it's gone, it's going to die. Like we cannot do it without him. So every time that would happen, it would kind of like our morale would kind of like, hold on. But then you'd be like, this is what I want to do, man. And people were like believing in me, but okay, let's just keep pushing. And now it's 7 years later, and we're still doing it. So I'm like, yeah, it's not always going to be a smooth road. There are humps, there are potholes, there are ridges, there are ditches, there are abductions along the way, there are threats, but you still push. You still push at it. And so besides, I mean, we're women, guys. We're strong. We're resilient, more than those guys. So if there's anyone who can handle this industry, it's us, more than the men. And the men in our industry have been supportive. So I'd say our country is we're actually blessed to be working with the guys that we work with, because as far as we've gone, in the comedy sector, I haven't come across yes, in bold and in caps, in the comedy sector, I haven't come any of those bedroom interviews or sexual favors or physical sexual abuse. No. And elsewhere, that's a story for another day, but not in the comedy industry.
Okay, interesting. Thank you very much for that. Lots more that I want to unpack, but I'm just going to quickly move on to Samantha, and then we'll circle back to everyone. Samantha, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Zaza. And it's a lot coming up after all the discussions that have been had. I've heard a lot of amplification towards the problems, which is really great, because before you address something, you need to know its impact. You need to know what is happening within the sector. And I've really appreciated that we've had real life examples from women that are actually active in this sector. And the presence of these women being among us, it shows that it's actually possible to have women in the creative sector, particularly focusing on comedy for this discussion. I was drawn to this discussion because of the word sustainable inclusion of women. We want to look at how to positively impact the inclusion of women in the sector such that it is long lasting. And over time, we want to change the narrative. And from the problems, I think what I've just been hearing has been resistance to change in the societies that we live, or in the media sector and filming industry, as Sharon put it. So right now, I'd want to address it as a woman also who is active, very active in taking up leadership in my own sector, to say sometimes the best way to tackle something is to look to introspect, because there are always going to be environmental, external, social, political factors that will draw you away from doing anything, from accomplishing your goals. And this happens, like Tare said, it's cross-cutting. So any sector that you're in, you're going to see this resistance against women, even worse, against young people. It's always going to be there. Well, it's not always going to be there, but it's been there across all the sectors. It's always going to be uniform. But what we can do as women is to look at how do we change the narrative? How do we take ownership? How do we claim responsibility for the things that are happening? And such ways of doing that, I think I was taking down notes here and there just to answer and respond to some of the things. Some things that could really help is things such as strategic planning. We've seen this work with various other women-focused programs just to empower women. So unless you have a strategy, you are blindly in an environment where even you yourself don't know what to do with yourself, and you're always going to be expecting the next person, even those perpetrators of these abuses, to be the ones to open up, where you're like, oh, we want to be welcomed. By who are you occupying the space? So we would appreciate like how Munya is doing. You see her in the space, you see her act towards it. And even if you now want to tackle the idea of being welcome, it's because you've presented yourself in such a platform. So that's always a solution, to have a strategy, do strategic thinking, have strategic planning, and monitor your own steps, know what impact you're having. Another thing is also to have results-based, and I'll pick it from the conversation that Sharon just shared with us. Yeah, it's a passion for her. This is why she's doing it. So even with or without the support that she's received, she's going to find it here. It's not a last resort to say it's been difficult for her. She's tried many other avenues, and it's a passion. So sometimes when you have a passion, you have to look at what are the results that you see with your passion, because you want to do something, but what are you aiming to achieve? And if you have this mentality or this framework, always as you engage in the various activities, as you create content, as you take on different roles, you always feel like, is it going to speak to the results that I'm looking for? If I feature on this week episode of Bustop TV, is it just that people know that there's Sharon, there's Magi now? Or is there another larger impact that you'd want to make with the work that you're doing? So it's always this whole result-based, solution-based thinking, even as you engage into an activity. And then there's the goal orientation, which is the overall why. And with everything, with any career, you need a goal. My goal is not to remain in the position that I am. I would really want to amplify my skills and experience until it has larger international impact. And each day with the work that I'm doing, I see the steps going. So I'm not just thinking of now to say, are they going to put me on the next skit, or are they going to give me this now job? Because they can deny you now, but are you doing something during that time that is going to push you towards that goal? Because you can miss all these opportunities that they've denied you in this year, but are you also preparing to take charge and to avoid the same thing from happening in the coming year? Are you also trying to mitigate it from happening to the next woman? Because it's not just you. Now you are even more empowered to stand up against, to even speak about it, because these are hard things to speak about, to say, I've been segregated, I've been stereotyped, I've been discriminated because I have ovaries, as she put it. So it's always good to have that kind of goal orientation, so that you know how to help yourself and others around you who are also active in the sector. Another thing is disaster preparedness. Guys, this happens everywhere. You get yourself involved with something, the first, it's rainbow. It's supposed to be 1 + 1 = 2. It's supposed to be that easy. And then you get thrown into a situation. Even the people that are active in the sector, they don't even know how to deal with that situation. People are no longer viewing your content because they want to see males on the skit. That's beyond even Simuka's control to say, how are we creating our content? That's audience engagement. It goes beyond that. So you always have to have this sort of disaster preparedness thinking, such that you find a net, you create a safety net, somewhere you can fall back on when you meet such resistance in the communities that you'll be working. So that's always really integral and very important. And looking at things such as matrilineal responsibilities as women, I don't want us to deny ourselves our identity. I feel what makes us unique is that we are women. What makes us powerful is that we are women. We have those ovaries. We need to be acknowledged as women, and we need the sector to provide for us, to accommodate us as women. I don't want to be treated like a man. I want equality, I want equity, but I also want to identify as a woman. And so when they are going on their boys' camps, like what Munya was talking about, what are they doing for the women? That's where you should be looking at and focusing on, to say, what are they also doing to accommodate me and to acknowledge me for where I am? Okay, as a woman, I'm not supposed to act rowdy. Maybe I'm not supposed to act rowdy. Are they giving me the luxuries that allow me to act as a lady? Hey, because I mean, the way that you're treated, you reciprocate the energy that you receive. So these are all the things that we should be fighting for in the sector. Let's fight to be women, to be recognized as women, to create the space that permits women. Because the reason why this problem has perpetuated for so long is because the sector in itself is not accommodating to women. So what do we do when someone is having is on a maternal leave or maternal break? Should they stop earning an income because of that? I do not think so. But the sector should acknowledge things like that, and there should be strategies in order to accommodate us as women. And this is the direction that I would think in terms of sustainable inclusion of women. This is what we should be looking at, and this is what you should be fighting for as you are active and present in these communities. And lastly, I think I'll just make it like really short right now, is that we must always remember that we are women. It's not a woman. So what happens to me doesn't just happen to me, it happens, of course, with everyone. So let's learn to speak with one voice, to be such a PT where we come together, we convene, we think of strategies. But there's another woman somewhere who's sitting, nah, this is not a problem. Why are we talking about inclusion? No, this is a male's environment. So always as women, let's share, let's be empathetic towards each other in such that whenever we engage collectively. And thanks to Simuka so much for arranging such a platform, because I mean, sustainability is a big deal. Inclusion, we can talk about it, but sustainability is a big deal, and I'd want to see the outcome of that.
Wow, thank you very much for that, Samantha. I mean, there's there's a big takeaway from this in terms of what you were saying in terms of how it really is about self-introspecting as a female within this sector, and having all these 6 people. I was taking notes, by the way. 6 things that you do. You strategize. You make sure that you have a results base. You make sure that you have a goal orientation, and then you have disaster preparedness, and then you also fight for a space that actually includes you, that actually is conducive for you to be there and to actually do the work as a comedian. And then lastly, of course, solidarity with other women is also a very, very important and huge thing that will also make sure that we can also have more women coming into the space and less women leaving the space because of the challenges that are existing within this particular space of comedy. And I think you have kind of started us off towards what I was going to go towards with the symposium, in terms of what are the practical ways in which we can actually make sure that there is sustainable inclusion of women. So I like what you did there, Samantha, in terms of we're looking at the self as the individual, and maybe just looking at also in terms of the organizations that are also operating within the space, within the space, and also organizations that are supporting the space. What are the things? What are the practical ways in which we can create an environment that is inclusive, an environment where female comedians can have sustainable careers? I will not go back to Tare at this moment. I'll go to Munya, who started Sekesai Collective. And yeah, just from you, what are the practical ways in which, because I'm sure that's something that you're also looking at as a collective, what are the practical ways in which you are working towards the sustainable inclusion of women within the comedy sector? And just before I allow you to speak, Munya, there's a comment from Kero Magenga. She says, collective action is absolutely key in implementing and achieving long-term change within the sector. Thank you very much for that, Carol, which is still cementing everything that we're saying. So thank you so much. And thank you for being here with us, Munya. Please take it away.
Yeah, that's definitely important, because like no matter how much work we do, it's not us. You tell your brothers and colleagues amongst yourselves, you need to do better. So at Sekesai Collective, what we focus on is incubating women and giving specific kind of attention that maybe you might not necessarily get in a more like a space dominated more by men, where there's just sort of like a chingoi tasha and just like throwing elbows and jokes. And if somebody wants to just like let's sit down and actually have a real, like we're saying, introspect with others, not just at home and pretend you don't have emotions because you're weak or something, really sit down and do that work, and incubating more safe spaces. I think other kinds of actions that we need to see, like really getting in there. And I think also a big thing is acting like women are just good for looking pretty and being on the screen. We need more female writers. We need more women behind the cameras, like direction. There's so many aspects of comedy. Like just what you see on the screen is such a small part of everything that went behind the scenes. And like one of my absolute favorite examples pointed out by Ashley Ray is she said Wanda Sykes would have had a bigger career than Chris Rock if it wasn't for sexism. And it was like, no, she's not even funny. How dare you? He's a goat, what? Until eventually, so she let his comment slide until eventually she pointed out that Wanda Sykes actually wrote a lot of Chris Rock's material. So now what? You just said she wasn't funny, but like those were her jokes. So now what? Like we need more of us everywhere. It's not just about being comedians. It's the whole, if it's TV reviewing, there's just so much more in the world of comedy and like in the art sector that we can intersect. And yeah, so and it starts with things like thinking that if girls want to be in film, they're gonna have to be in front of the camera and have the lead part and be like super sexy and do a carpet interview and no, like what if I'm really into cinematography? I should be allowed to be a technical kind of person, and like my unique flavor if I am a director of photography of like a movie or just skits or something, it can bring a whole new flavor and a whole new meaning to the work that you've done instead of just maybe the usual way people set things up. And what's nice about listening to people who you don't normally listen to is that they see things that you had missed. So yes, some people sometimes are better, but even they're not necessarily better. It's just if you've been doing XYZ with you and your boys for 5 years, of course, if you just bring someone else with a different perspective, you're going to see a whole new world and be open to a whole new audience. And I think part of that also, like, talking about that unfortunate incident where people say, if the boys leave, then the audience leaves as well. They say it's not funny. Sometimes let them go, because you're constantly pandering and catering to a specific kind of audience. And that's not all there is out there to entertain. There's a whole other audience, us 51% of us, who consistently get ignored by all the content that there is. So let 49% go. They're only 49%. Let's focus on the 51%. It's the same, and people will say, oh, the morals are going or whatever. And it's like you say, to make it sustainable in the culture, we need to change the culture. And it's the same argument that people have with rap, right? Like, oh, how dare Cardi B be rapping about all these profane things? We don't have enough fingers and toes to count how many rap songs from last year alone sang by men had profanity and were like hypersexualized and everything. Like, now she's done it. And like what Samantha's saying, like, allow me to be a woman and my kind of woman. If my kind of woman is being demure, let me be that way. If my kind of woman is being loud and out there, let me be that person. Let me be a person is all we're asking. Give us not just the equality, but give us the equity. We need to catch up. And I think that's the problem, is a lot of people see that equality. So the same amount. It's like, no, I'm actually malnourished. I might actually need more food to catch up with you. It's not about, and maybe I don't want that food. That's not what I asked for. Maybe no one did it because I'm thirsty. I don't want the food, but you're not giving me something else. So with the collective, that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to bridge those gaps, and like, everybody is welcome. We do focus on women and queer people, but nobody's not going to be invited. And we try to do events just for queer people, just for queer women, for all women, and then for everybody. So at least everybody has a safe space to grow, and then you're then ready for the public. And that's also something that's missing in the comedy sector, because we don't have, we don't really have disposable income and like transport to the event and so what we need more of is open mic spaces, where we can just try things and not be too judged, and not have someone be like, that bed's at $10. You're wasting my data. Like, no, come, it's for free. For free. We're all just trying things out. We're all just friends, and then we can progress later too. And I think that's just building that symbiotic relationship between audience members and artists. And I think we're getting there. It's a bit of a fledgling thing, and yeah, we'll make it. Please come to the shows.
Yeah, definitely come to the shows. There are shows that are happening, and I'm going to give them time to actually plug the shows that are happening as part of this festival. We have the Divas Comedy. I'm going to let Munya to share the details of the date and time for you to go and watch the show, because this is also how we actually make sure that we actually have sustainable inclusion of female comedians within the sector. And I love what you said. So some of the things that you talked about, Munya, was how we need to empower more women writers. We need to empower more women behind the camera, and also what we need to actually build audiences, and not just have a case of where people have to pander to audiences that have already been created for other products or for other particular people, but building more audiences for new voices, for women who are new to the space. So that is also important. And also, just looking at bridging the gaps that are already existing within the sector, which is some of the things that you're doing with your collective. And definitely we need more spaces for women to try out their material, for them to try out their material whilst they're still growing, where they're still finding their feet. I think that is really important, because there is no industry out there that doesn't actually thrive in terms of performing arts where there are no open mics that are actually, that nurture and grow talent in this particular way. So thank you for that. I'm going to move on to Tare. What are the practical ways or practical tools or steps in which we can actually ensure that there's more inclusion of females in the comedy sector?
So one thing that I've tried to do within my tenure is to create spaces for female creatives. I think being conscious about who it is that you choose to work with is really important. So whether it's creatives that are on stage or creatives behind the scenes, this is something that I have really tried to do. So for example, lighting in most of the time is done by lighting bay. Yes, there may be other light engineers that are good, but I'm going to work with Lighting Bay because I feel like we must support the only female lighting engineer in the country, right? And like now she's started working with younger females and trying to teach other women how to actually do lighting engineering and whatever, because the skill and the talent is there. It's just we hadn't been given permission to do it. So I feel the more that you are conscious about who it is that you choose to work with, and by deliberately making certain choices, it starts to rub off. I didn't realize how deliberate my choice was until someone asked me in a questionnaire that, so we've noticed you do a lot of work with women and create spaces for women. How is that possible? What do you know? What brought this on? What brought this thinking? That's when I thought, oh, okay, so it's working now. People are starting to see that this is what, you know, I've been doing and what I've been trying to do. So every single day, we have to make a conscious decision to do better, actually. Let's just make a conscious decision to do better, because I think that's where it lies. It's not easy, but we have to do it. Yeah.
Thank you, Tare. And I love what you said about. I think these are really very key things, and I'll speak about the last one you said, where you're saying we have to make a conscious decision to do better. So it's not enough to talk about how things that there's a challenge. It's not enough to say that things have been always working this particular way, but and we don't like how it works. No, we have to actually do better, and we actually have to do it practically instead of just just showing what is happening and what is not working.
Yeah.
And I also loved about what you said, where you said you also being more deliberate about who you work with. And I think there's something about that, and there's something really profound, even though it sounds very simple. But I think there's something really profound about that, where you actively, because you're actively making a choice to say, in terms of who I am supporting, I'm supporting these kinds of people because we need to have more of these kinds of people. I'm going to support more. I'm going to support the lighting bay because we need to have more lighting, female lighting designers. And I love how it's from that support, she has actually cascaded that towards other aspiring young female lighting designers. So if we are actually more deliberate in terms of who we choose to support, we don't even realize the power of what we're doing, because the effects of it are we can't even measure them, because the impact of it is quite far-reaching than we actually can imagine. So definitely, I think that's a really, really good takeaway: being deliberate about who you work with and who you support, and also being conscious of what you do and trying to do better and being better than yesterday or today, even if it's only if today is still terrible. All right, great. Sharon, your take in terms of the practical ways in which we can include more females in the comedy sector.
I'd like to add on to what she was just saying about in making a conscious decision to include women. I like to point out to what I've seen personally with the comedians or the companies that have female comedians, or any way links to the comedy sector. First and foremost, Bustop, of course, and then Magamba Network, and then Simuka. I've had people ask me, like, they may come to the office and they comment, my baby, and I'm like, yeah, it's a good thing. It's a good thing, and we want more. Like, we want more, be it interns or even people who become like fully employed, or um contributors for Magambo or anything. There are females, there are lots of females there. So I'm proud to say that we and the people that are around us have made the conscious decision to include more females. It might still be behind the scenes right now, but actually Munya was saying we want more females involved in the technicalities of it all. So that has been happening. So the outside world might not see it until they come to the office and they notice, hey, so many ovaries in here. But yeah, so we're trying. So now we need more people in front of the camera on the stage. So now what we can do is things like this, the symposiums, call out to people, have shows that like what Munya has been doing, Sekesai, like she calls out to come and share your stories. Come on stage, share your stories. And sometimes you find a little hard the way I shared people were actually laughing when I was on stage sharing my story. That's comedy. Basically, you're talking about things you've experienced, maybe the worst date of your life, but then you put a funny spin to it. That's comedy. Like, you're right. You're making fun of what you know. So some people don't even know that they're funny until they actually get the chance. So actually, just holding stuff like that is what we want. So we want more of that and more spaces. And what else could we get? But what we need to stop, or what we need to make sure that we don't do personally, like what we see happen in the political sector. You often hear or see people like when there's a female MP or councillor or whatever.
Sorry, Sharon, to interrupt you. We are losing you a little bit there. Must be a network issue. When you're now talking about really important things and you're making plans to really create really meaningful and really good change, things happen. Anyway,
am I still touching go?
Oh yeah, now she's back. Please, we lost you a little bit there.
Okay.
For like a minute or two, so maybe you just pick up from what you were talking about in terms of the last thing we heard from you was when you were talking about how when you're sharing your story, people were laughing, and that's comedy.
Oh yeah, so basically I was saying that give people platforms like that. Some people don't know they're funny until they actually tell their story and people laugh. So I was just saying, you never know you never know, maybe a comedian, but so we give people such spaces like Munya has been doing to just come and share a date night, the worst date night, the worst sex they ever had. Yeah, I know. Some people will be like, how can I talk about that? But then you don't know. You don't know. Get out of your comfort zone. Come out of the box and talk about it. And we want to hear it. Don't we? People might cringe, but you don't always have to, you don't ever have to make everyone laugh or to make everyone comfortable. And that's also comedy. Not everyone is comfortable when you make people laugh. And then I was getting into the fact equity. Sometimes we ourselves, women, hold other women back. So I'm just praying that we don't do what we see happening in the political sector. Like sometimes you see there's a female MP that's there or councillor. Once they get a seat in parliament, or once they start having a voice or a say, they adopt those male tendencies that we're trying to get rid of by including more women. So now it's like there's no change, there's no difference. So if we ourselves, the ones who are inside, start shutting other women out because maybe we view them as competition or something like that, then we're just going to be stuck where we are. So we should uplift each other and not view each other as competition and stop acting like males. We want more females, not just more people with breasts but acting like males.
Definitely. Thank you very much for that, Sharon. And one of the things that I picked up from your contribution was how these three organizations that actually are now being known to say, "Oh, Modajema baby," because there are more women within those spaces. So even just making that, this is also the idea of making a deliberate effort to actually include more females within this particular space that you're operating from, and being known for that, and choosing to make sure that your brand is known for that, and and your brand is actively working towards making that change. And the other thing that you also said that is really important is how once women are in positions of power, it's important to actually hold space for other women. You don't just get into the space and occupy that space, but you get into that space, occupy that space, and hold that space for other women, and also even open the door for other women to come into the space and have their voice in that particular in that particular space. And I think some of the things that, like what Tare was saying, that sometimes women will be scared of losing that seat or that position, or because sometimes it's nice to be known as the only working female comedian. So it's okay. I'm just going to make sure that no one else comes after me, because then, well, I will lose that position. But really being confident in the fact that the space is big enough for all of us, and being confident enough to know that the reason why you're there is not just by accident. No one can take that space from you. No one can take that position from you. So thank you very much for that. We are drawing close to the end of our symposium. We have been going on for an hour and a minute and 31 seconds. I don't know about you guys who are listening to us, the audience. I think you've got really, really strong stamina, because an hour, man, that's a women. That's a that's a long time. That's a long time. All right. So I'm just going to go around asking our panelists to actually just say your last words, or anything, one really important thing that you want our audience members to carry with, something that they can also practice within their spaces, or something that they can support towards the sustainable inclusion of women within the comedy sector. So I will start with Samantha.
Thanks, Zaza. Before I say my one last takeaway, you also didn't ask us what we're actively doing to ensure that there's sustainable inclusion of women. And I want to express, because as Hivos, we're really concerned about free expression. We are also very particular about inclusion of women. And so we really primarily focus on boosting capacity. So we do capacity building and we do capacity strengthening. And some of the activities that we've done this year, I think they'll be really resourceful to some of the comedian artists that are already in the sector or that want to start up. We've had audiovisual letters to creatives, where we interviewed various artists, because we operate regionally in Zimbabwe, Zambia, and Malawi. So we interviewed creative experts, and they had a bit of nuggets to share about all the hurdles that they faced in their careers and how they've overcome that. So if you go on our regional pages, Hivos Southern Africa, you can listen in and see how you can adapt this to your own experiences as a woman who's operating in the creative sector, creative media sector. We've also done financial sustainability for creatives, which I think is really integral and important at this stage. Some of the tools that featured in this activity will help you to be able to monetize your efforts. So like how Magi was speaking about, people constantly asking you, what else do you do? What else do you do? You can actually have a monetization strategy, an own income generation strategy, and still be active in the industry. And we looked at all of these factors, very practical and closer to home in the region. And we have the outputs that are available again with Hivos. So it's just a matter of visiting our website. And also, finally, we've done amplification of skills. So it just goes beyond where people, like how Munya was saying, it's not just who you see in front of the screen, but it's also about the technical bits that happen behind the scene. And we've been building a lot of technical capacity of women in various skills. And right now we've looked at animation, we've looked at archiving. So we are empowering women. It's just a matter of having a strategy, finding yourself in the right place, and then identifying who works together with you, and everything else will fall together. So my last parting words to everyone, specifically if you're concerned with this creative sector, is that we are women, as Hivos to say, women unlimited. We cannot be capped. You know, we cannot be confined. We will express ourselves. We will have a voice. We will act as one movement, and we will continue to open the space. So I'm also putting myself in these shoes to just say that we are women and watch the space. I think that's my parting saying.
All right. Thank you very much, Samantha, for that. And like she said, if you need more resources, there you can go to their website, Hivos Southern Africa. Just Google them, and you can find the resources that she was talking about. Yes, and we are women, so yeah, let's not forget that there is a power in that, and let's tap into that power. All right. Last words, we'll go with Munya.
Last words. Come to the shows. Come to the shows. Come to the shows. For the love of goodness, come to the shows, please. And not just because we're like, oh, we need audience money so that we can pay our rent and eat. No, like, you know, you get into this because you're genuinely interested in hearing people's stories, and there's so much more to them, to people, to women than we get to see in ordinary society. And that's what we're there to do. You know, come share your stories that like you're not allowed to share anyone else. And it was fun because one of the last events we had, people came back on stage to give advice to somebody who'd just been up there and, you know, just talk their stories and everything. So make the deliberate choices to include women, make the deliberate choices to make them comfortable. Don't just think in your frame of mind of, oh, this is enough for me. Like, we want toilet paper in our bathrooms, please. So small things that is not important to you, but it's important to us. And listen, just listen. It may seem inconsequential and it may seem like munarguneza, but honestly, by the time most of us have even said anything, it's really just tip of the iceberg. Something has been going on for a long time, and there's so many things that aren't great and not going on. And for those of you who are doing this work, well done, I guess, if you wanted a medal. But unfortunately, there are no medals for doing good things. Otherwise, women would have no necks. We would just be like this all day if there were medals for doing good things. But yeah, thank you. Come to the shows, and thank you for listening, and thank you for your time. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Munya, for that. Yeah, definitely go to the shows, support the shows, and definitely make the spaces, the environment conducive for people to work comfortably without having to, you know, suffer indignities for the sake of their passions. Indeed. And then last words, Tare.
So I was hoping you'd pick me next because, like, literally, Munya is funny without trying. So you must go to the shows. She's actually funny. Oh God, I was silently dying there. Last words, I would say, to females within the comedy sector, to females within the creative sector at large, just to women. Do you? Life is too short to worry about what people are going to think. If this is something that is if people say it's never been done, then you start the trend. If people say, you know, oh, it's so weird, a woman doing it, you're going to be the first one to do it. And you'll see that people will jump onto the bandwagon. They'll catch up. They'll get with the program. So do you? You'll never like please everybody. Whatever you do, there's always going to be someone that's going to say something, whether it's positive or negative. There will always be somebody. So just live your life, Sha. Like, do you? That's literally my mantra. It's for the past 2 years, do you?
Thank you very much for that, Tare. And you only have got one life to live, so definitely do you.
Yeah.
Don't do about anyone else, or don't do. Yeah,
because you know they're not going to be there when you're being judged. They're not going to be there. You are going to be asked, "What did you do?" So you can't be like,
yes.
No, where's Sekuru? He's not next to you, guy. Do you?
Thank you very much for that, Tare. Sharon, last words.
Okay. So my last words. sometimes people are not going to give you the space. People are not going to give you the chance. They're not going to listen to you. So if you're too soft or too silent, or you're just sitting there waiting, things will not happen. Okay, fine. If you've got to be soft, then be so aggressively soft. Be silently loud. Find a way to put yourself, to insert yourselves in there. Get yourself out there and just do what you want to do. So there's no one who was stubborn at times, but I remember growing up in naro zangu zakabhadhara, guys. Being stubborn paid. So yeah, so do that. And then I also want to preach inclusion. Because yeah, being in my current situation has just opened a whole new world to me. So I'm saying my pregnancy is not an inability, guys. Just make sure your workspaces include me. I inclusive. Kana muchini ndozonetsa chindisirai chair. Put a chair for me. Put a footstool for me there. Just make the workspace inclusive for me. If you're saying good is just going to be comfortable, make it comfortable for me. We also always say this about other people, other situations, like people who are disabled. Could ramp your wheelchair because they need to be included. I feel like do what works, whatever should work, do it. And find just because. Takura, the next big comedian over here, and you are excluding me from stuff. So, besides, you're all here because of another woman was in this situation. So, yeah, inclusion.
Indeed, thank you very much for that, Sharon. And I love what you talked about, how in terms of inclusion, it's not even just about the working environment. It's also looking at how can we also make sure that people, even people with disabilities, can also come to the shows to perform, can also come and perform comedy. So we also have to think of that in terms of there are also women with disability who might also want to become comedians, but because maybe the venue doesn't have a ramp, or maybe the bathrooms don't have a toilet store that allows a wheelchair user to actually access the toilet. So all of us just thinking in terms of those things, that is also really important, and not making a decision to say, oh, because you're like this, maybe you won't want to do this, but let's create environments that are inclusive of all people and people coming from all spaces. And yeah, I think that will be really awesome. And just plugging in what Musha was saying, do come to the shows. So I'm going to plug in a show that is happening under the Simuka Comedy Festival. It's happening tonight at 7 p.m. at the Reps Theatre, and it's going to have Tanya, it's going to have Munya, who's on the panel with us, it's going to have Misty from Ulawayo, and then Chimwemwe. So please support the females in the comedy sector by turning up for this show. And I mean, I know you spend more money on alcohol and meat and things. I think $10, I think you can please just buy a ticket and go, at least, or buy for someone so that they can go and watch the show. So yeah, I just had to do that plug. Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen, for being here with us this afternoon, speaking on this topic that is a very important topic, and lots of things that we unpacked, and lots more that needs to be unpacked even more. But there's so many practical tools that I'm hoping that if there are organizations, if there are individuals that are supporting or working within the comedy sector, you had some takeaways that you can actually start implementing. And also, even if you are none of the above players that I've talked about, how you can also maybe lend a supporting hand. And also, even for female comedians, I hope you also got some takeaways in terms of how to insult respect and how to actually make sure that you solidify your presence and, tap into the power of being a woman and actually occupy that space and hold that space, not just for yourself, but for more women to come through. So thank you so much, Munya, for being here. Thank you, Sharon. Thank you, Tare. Thank you, Samantha. You've all been really wonderful panelists, and thank you to our audience, wherever you're joining us from. The comedy festival still goes on. You're going to be given some details more in terms of what is happening, but tonight there better be people at Reps Theatre upstairs. Yeah? All right. Okay. Thank you. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thanks. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
See you later.
Thank you.
See you later.